What's up everybody? Gunnar here. Today I'm going to tie a body tubing bulkhead. So it's going to use Chocolate's 1/8 body tubing by Flyman. And it's just a cool idea. I got the idea from Popovics' new book, Fly Design. Recommend it to everybody. It's an awesome book. It'll get you going on bucktail, pike flies, and musky stuff and saltwater stuff, and you'll be good to go. That book is really fun to read, and so this is what the idea came from. It's obviously from his bulkhead. And he does something called an extended body where he'll tie on mono. I'm just going to use Flyman shanks here. These are the 20mm articulated shanks. You can also tie it on the fish spines if you want, but I like the articulated shanks because it's a nice big loop and it fits in my vise really easy. So that's what I'm going to be using. But I tie this fly so far in 3 sizes. I have like a Pike XL, and a Musky, and it's just various different shanks to get your different bulks and stuff. But this smallest size, which is what we're going to tie in today, is 2 shanks and a 3/0 Universal Predator X from Partridge, and it probably comes out at about 6.5 inches long, and it is, I don't know, it's beautiful. Like, I would fish a 6.5 inch fly for smallmouth, largemouth, pike, spring musky, like walleye, brown trout, I don't care, lake trout, whatever you're doing. It is like the prime predator size. So I really dig this fly. I think I just have a lot of confidence in it, and when you watch it swim, it's badass. But I like to do 2 different heads so far. I like a fish mask head, which I think is probably going to be money in clearer waters, right? Especially for kind of visual predators. I like big eyes on my flies, but today we're going to tie a bucktail butt head, like an original bulkhead, right? We're going to use bucktail butts to shape the head, push a little bit more water, a little bit more towards the pike and musky end of the spectrum here. And that big, I don't know, all those bucktail butts throw a lot of water over the shoulders of the fly and get a nice slipstream for the tail to move in. So we're going to start tying. I already did the back one. This is ostrich hurl fur tail, straight tied butt tail, nothing fancy. I'll talk about it later when I get to the hook. And then I just threw a little bit of flash on there. So let's get tying. Alright, so we got 2 shanks, right? 2 20mm shanks on an extended body, right? So basically we took the body of the fly and we extended it, right? Not rocket science. But I had someone ask me why on one of my posts, and here I am, just I'm imitating Popovics, and I think it's a cool idea. But having to ask yourself why is a super, I don't know, important part of designing a fly, right? No matter who you're imitating, whether it's Kelly or Strolis or Nicholas Bauer, whatever you're doing, I always ask myself why. And so, it gave me an opportunity to come up with an answer, which I appreciated. And basically, bucktail is only so long. If I put bucktail back here, the fly's only going to be, this long. And I want to be able to carry this bucktail and this bulk and this type of movement farther back into the fly without the need of a secondary hook or anything like that. And the thing about bucktail is it's cheap, right? I didn't have to go out and buy, $35 hackles to put on this fly. It's extremely durable. It's extremely practical. And something about bucktail that's similar to marabou, as I talk about a lot. It's thick at the base, it's skinny at the tip, so each fiber has a lot of movement. When you cut it off the tail, right, you get a lot of variance. You get short hairs, medium hairs, long hairs, and extra long hairs. And when you tie that in, you get a beautiful taper of material that creates a nice solid profile, right? And instead of having to trim a fly when you're done, you can just tie it in basically pre-layered, right? So that when you're finished, you have this nice beautiful profile of a bucktail fly. And I don't have all the answers, you know, but that's what I got for you. I think it's just nice. It gives you the perfect length to bulk ratio in a predator triggering fly that would be hard to achieve otherwise using natural materials. So that's what I got for you. But going up to the front now, I'm gonna actually tie on GSP. I tied all the other stuff with a power thread, Vivus 140 power thread, but now we're going to GSP, and we're gonna try to keep this 20 millimeter tie-in section the same. So I want to tie this in at about 20 millimeters here. And something that I've done so far, right, obviously certain parts of the bucktail have different, you know, some compress more than others. These have more trapped air, these has less. You know, these fibers tend to be a little bit shorter, these are your longest, like whatever it is. The back is almost all, I like to tie tip hair, just because it doesn't compress a lot. And if it does compress, you know, you can just put a few wraps back onto it to kind of close that gap a little bit. And yeah, so this is going to be straight tie, straight tie, straight tie. And then we're going to start adding bulk with the reverse tie, and then we're going to have fun with the body tubing and a BULKhead. So that's what's going on. So let's keep going. So something I'm doing right now, yeah, like when you tie all this bucktail in, right, you want to build this taper. So if you tie this in full length, it's going to build up here and it's going to look super fat in the back end, right? But I want to create a nice taper, so I'm kind of measuring this off each other. And I just want my longest fibers to start bleeding into the shortest fibers. You see what I'm doing? The longest fibers up here are bleeding into the shorter fibers down here, so that my kind of profile that I'm going to achieve when this is all said and done is continuous. And then I'm going to put 3 wraps on this, just let the bobbin hang, and you kind of just work this around the hook, right? You don't have to be super quick about it. There's a lot of different ways to distribute the hair, but slight tension, pinch and pull, right? I'm just going to compress all that. And something that I like to do, and something that's talked about in the book, is when you're tying in this bucktail, right, you want to keep that natural variance in your fiber length. If you take only the longest hairs and you only always tie the longest hairs, you're going to end up with like a staircase, right? But you don't want. You want to keep your medium long and extra long fibers so that you have maximum tip exposure, like with the marabou, palmering from long to short, right? You want that variance so that you have a continuous profile. If you only tie in your long fibers, it's just not going to look the same. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Now when I'm tying in this flashabou, right, this is just holographic flash, I'm doing like 2 or 3 strands, 2 or 3 strands, 2 or 3 strands. Like, it's not a lot, right? It's just a little bit on each stack to give it a little flash on the back. But I'm cutting it short. You know, I'm probably cutting 4 inches off of this, putting in a slight taper, coming up on top, and just spreading it with my thumb. And if you tie it in a little bit before you're tying, right, this is tied in, you know, probably a centimeter before where I'm going to tie it back to. That distance gives you the room that you need to manipulate it to spread it around the hook, so it's not all bunched up together. And now it's the length of the bucktail, right? And I have some shorter and some longer, and that bleeds into these ones, and that bleeds into these ones, right? It's the same principles that you're using. I don't want to keep tying in flashabou at full length and having it, you know, trailing and tangling and wrapping around things. So just cut off, you know, 4 or 5 inches, little taper, right on top. No big deal. Keep going. So now that we're on the hook shank, right, we got straight tie, straight tie, straight tie. This one's got a little bit more material to it. It's from a little bit more compressible part of the body, just to give this back a little bit more bulk. Now I'm going to do a reverse tie, right? And I'm measuring this off my old fibers here. Don't want to tie it in too long. And I'm gonna take out my longest fibers, right? You see, my longest fibers were a little bit too long. And the reason why I'm doing that is because bucktail has that fat base, skinny tip, right? Well, if you take a long fiber and you cut it short, you lose that taper in the material, and so it's not going to move the same. And there's a quote in Popovics' book, I forget who it's originally from, so I apologize, sorry, but it's something like, you know, a long fiber cut short is not the same as a short fiber. So that's definitely applies here in this. So I just preened out the very longest hairs. Don't really need those ones just because they were a little bit too long, instead of taking the long fibers and cutting them short, is what I'm trying to get to. See what I'm saying? So now we got a nice spread on that. I don't really care about these bucktail butts. Push tool. Push it all back. Nice. Try to take out any twist, right? You want the fibers laying straight back. You don't want a fiber from over here way over there. You know, pretty obvious on that one. I'm going to put a pretty steep angle on this. Kind of bleed it right into the angle from the straight tie back here. Bring your thread through parallel to your hook, right? Start wrapping on. Try not to catch any fibers. That's what that's about. And we're just going to build a thread dam in front of this to force these fibers back, right? Not tying on the bucktail, tying up to the bucktail. So the most important thing, in my opinion, when you're reverse tying, is your bobbin and your wraps need to be perfectly vertical when you're going forward and backwards. A lot of people do this and this. Right, you see how I'm going at a pretty severe angle. Obviously I'm overdoing it to get to the point, right? But you want to wrap perfectly vertical so that your cone is perfectly shaped, so that your bucktail is perfectly spread. If you have an uneven shaped cone because your thread's going at an angle and weird stuff, you'll see like this side will be flat and this side will be flared and your top will be pinched and your bottom will be open. Like, a lot of weird stuff can happen, so just be aware of that. You want to be perfectly vertical with your cone wraps. And I'm going to use a cool material here. It's the new barred Flashaboo from Hedron, right? I think it's a really easy and cool way to get kind of a darker barred back without having to use any hackles or anything. It's a cool product. And I'm pretty sure it's fluorescent. If you put a light on here, like a UV light, it reflects a lot of other light frequencies, so it's got a lot of cool properties to it aside from just the barring. And I switched up from a chartreuse Flashaboo to the new olive, and likewise I switched up from straight chartreuse bucktail. I did a blend here, and then I'm going to move to straight olive just to get a few different tones in here. Wrapping straight on top, spreading that off to the sides, and then wrapping that back so it stays in place. I'm actually going to come up my cone a little ways. Okay, that's a fail. Ugh. Sorry about that. Time for the body tubing. So this is the 1/8 inch, right? It's the smallest size they make right now. And when you're working with body tubing, probably the most important thing that you're going to do is the length that you cut it to, right? Now, I have like a little series here of like what I call perfect head shapes, just an opinion, but for the 1/8 inch, I like to cut it to 1 3/8 inch long, 1 3/8, right? I just measure it off my scissors, but that's where the point is on my scissors. And I'm just going to tie this on here. And what we're going to do, right, the original BULKhead, what you do is you straight tie your bucktail, but you leave the butts in instead of cutting them off, and then you force the butts back with a push tool, and you reverse tie the butts. But what we're going to do is to keep our angle, right, to keep our reverse tie angle increasing and getting steeper, and we're going to shorten these fibers a little bit to get the front kind of the fish, the head of the fish here. we're going to leave the butts in, and we're still going to get the angle, and then we're going to be able to reverse tie the butts. So it's going to give you like a lot of free bulk, and it's going to push a lot more water and be able to build more bulk in the front with the bucktail and create a really nice profile. This is probably my new favorite way of using body tubing. It's absolutely awesome. I am not happy with this. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm gonna fix it. Because this is what you do, right? What happened is I put my body tubing probably a full centimeter too far forward on my hook shank. I really wanted to get one more section of bucktail on here, and I just can't right now. So I'm cutting all this off. Never be afraid to do this. This is what learning is all about. Now, I super glued all this, right? This is why razor blades are important. Mistakes happen. Don't move on until it's perfect. It didn't help that there's also super glue and stuff, but freedom. Alright. Let's nail it this time. Perfection. So, my body tubing was a little too far forward, so what I'm going to do to prevent that from happening again is I'm going to throw a little thread dam on here so that when I go to cinch down and compress on that body tubing, it's not going to be able to slide forward. So one thing I recommend when using this 1/8 inch body tubing is burn it right away. In my experience, it has a tendency to kind of blow up on you if you try to use it without closing your ends first. So I just always close the ends as soon as I cut it. And then if it's too closed when you go to tie it in, you know, just open it up a little bit with your scissors is all. But what you can do, right, I've only burnt one of these ends. Take your leg to it, burn it, and then you can open that up with your scissors, and that'll help reverse tie that a little bit. Perfect. Yes, that is what I wanted. Okay, let's do this. 2 sections of bucktail this time. And just to make sure this bucktail can't sneak too far forward, just going to put a little thread dam right here. That's good too, because I wanted to add some flash and I didn't get the chance to do that yet. Right, so bucktail cut, praying out the very shortest fibers, not all that variance, just the shortest fibers. Kind of hold this up to wherever you have a nice taper. Let that flare and compress a little bit, right? And just walk that around the hook with your fingernails and thumbs, and you can kind of just pull on these tips, right? Oh, flawless. That's awesome. I'm just going to come in here, just put a little randomness into these bucktail butts. The original BULKhead, when you're tying like a Popovics style BULKhead, when your bucktail butts are hanging over your hook eye, you can basically just come in and do a straight cut, and it's going to give you short fibers on the inside and long fibers on the outside, right? Which is what he does. I just have a hard time reversing it with that type of cone angle up here. When you have really short fibers, I just trap them also. I just throw a little taper in there after I've tied it in. Now on the fish mast version, we'll see if this works out. On the small one, I like to do a number 8.5 mast, right? And I will slip it over these bucktail butts. And the bucktail butts will still give you a nice collar, and it'll push a lot of water even though the fish mask is still on there, right? And it just helps fill your fish mask cavity. And you just throw a thread dam up front, or you can fill this with UV and cure it once it's on there. And it's really nice having that body tubing behind the fish mask because it fills the cavity and you still have flared material, right? It doesn't all just lay back. So that's how you do the fish mask version. The butt version, we're just going to spin another thing up here. And what's, side note, right? The new fish masks are soft, bendable. They're like a rubber or a soft plastic or whatever they are, so that they don't crack. They're really durable. So awesome upgrade on the fish mask. I really like. The new ones are superb. So try them out. They're awesome, especially for putting eyes on flies. Super easy. So I'm going to put some lateral line flash on here, and then one more section of bucktail. So something that I love about doing a bucktail spin that close to the hook eye is the hook eye is actually going to help support your cone, and so your cone's not going to want to collapse on itself really at all, and you can get a really nice angle on your bucktail butts really quickly. So I keep like doing little facts that aren't like actual sentences. They're almost like statements, and then I just leave it. It's very odd. But that is a body tubing bulkhead. Look at all that. Now if you want, you can kind of flare this out a little bit and trim it at some random lengths again, right? Again, I like to do this kind of after I've reversed it, but it's totally up to you, whatever you like doing. This is a really easy way to mess things up. So that is the bucktail butt version of the Pike size body tubing bulkhead. I'm gonna get this wet because this looks pretty trashy, right? There's a lot of static in those fibers and stuff. Getting it wet's just gonna tame all that bucktail down. It's gonna give you a more realistic profile. But you should know, when it's soaking wet and it's dripping, like that's not what it's gonna look like in the water, right? It's going to look like this in the water, just the tamed down version. So I'll get it wet. I'll show you guys one more time, but thanks for watching. Bye. It's like a phone conversation. Hey, yeah, see ya. Bye. Talk to you next week. All right, wet and dried. There you have an extended body tubing bulkhead. So check that out.